Today on Thought Salon, I want to talk about decisions and problems. So, if you've ever had a problem that you needed to fix or solve that just keeps lingering, once in a while, we just have this moment of clarity that says, oh my gosh, what's the obvious answer? This answer has been sitting there and waiting for me to choose it and to listen to it for a long time. So I want to think about this in terms of our thoughts. Ask yourself, do you think life is simple or life is complicated? It's kind of a continuum. Of course, sometimes life seems simple and sometimes life seems complicated. I know this is sort of a big picture question, but overall, are you a person that thinks your life is simple and thinks life is simple, or do you think life is complicated? So, I want you to sit with this for just a second. Even close your eyes and just sit back. Take a deep breath. When you think the thought, life is complicated, how does that make you feel in your body? Just take a minute. Okay, now take a minute. Same thing. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and think about the thought, life is simple. Okay, let's go back. When you thought life is complicated, what happens in your body? I can see that anxiety, maybe overwhelm, confusion. There are too many choices. Once in a while, this rises up. It's almost like it's kind of bubbling under the surface of life in general all the time. And then once in a while, it's like a volcano. It just erupts and like life becomes complicated and it seems overwhelming and there are too many decisions to make and all of that. So that thought, life is complicated, is often under the surface and then just comes up once in a while. And then once in a while, I don't know if you've experienced this, when you just thought life is simple, how does that make you feel? Calmer, more centered, more grounded, like you have time. I want you to go back to a time in your childhood or in your recent life where you felt life was simple, where you had that feeling that rose up from inside that felt simple. Okay, so both of those thoughts, life is complicated and life is simple, are on this continuum. And sometimes it's really interesting to kind of think about, where am I on this simple or complicated continuum? If I'm on the complicated side, I'm feeling more often overwhelmed, more often confused, more often like I have a lot of problems to solve or things to deal with. Then I can think about pushing myself a little bit further down the road towards the simple side. Okay, so as we think about problems, I want you to think about a specific problem that you may have had recently. Okay, when we have a problem, often we're in that complicated zone. Oh, it's complex. There's all these different moving parts to it. So often we think, how do I fix this problem right away? But before that, there may be a lot of rumination. There may be a lot of living in the complex end of your continuum, just ruminating and just thinking about like all the different options or the problem itself or everything that it brings up. So when you have a problem, think about what is the problem? What is the actual problem? And it's helpful to write this down. So write down in your journal, in your notebook, what is the problem? And I'm going to give you a moment right now to do that with any specific problem you may have been having. Just write it down. Okay. Now, I want you to think about what the cause of the problem is. Is it from someone else is causing this problem? Is it yourself that's causing this problem? Is it money? Is it job? Is it, a situation in your life that's causing the problem? Is it the weather? What is the cause of the problem? Okay. So I want you to take a minute now and think about that cause of the problem and step back from the problem. Like the problem is a little hairball and you're stepping back in the room where you look down on your dusty floor and there's this ball of dust or whatever. Look at it and think differently. See if you can see the bigger picture surrounding this problem. And I'm just going to give you a minute to jot down some thoughts about that. Okay. So now, of those thoughts that you jotted down and the way that you're kind of stepping back and looking at this problem, is the problem caused by a circumstance beyond your control? Or is it caused by the way you're thinking about the circumstance? So, for instance, I want to create a painting. This is a very kind of innocuous problem. But as artists, sometimes these small problems seem large, right? Our simple to complex scale sometimes gets out of proportion. And we put things that are actually really simple on the complex side. So I have a show coming up. I'm going to need to make a painting. I want to make a big painting. I want to make a big painting that is painted outside. But it's pouring down rain. Okay. So in that case, is the problem my circumstance that I can't go outside in the wind and rain to paint? That's the weather. I can't control that. Or is the problem how I'm thinking about the circumstance? So for instance, I could solve that or fix that problem by I'm going to go outside in the wind and rain and take some photos, come back to my studio and paint from the photos. Or I may go out and sketch or draw or feel the rain or feel the landscape or look very closely at it in the storm and then come back to my studio. So you see, the weather may be a problem, but it's the way I'm thinking about the weather that is more of a problem. That's just a small example. I just want you to know that obviously we all have a range of problems or issues that we're trying to solve in our lives on a daily basis. Should I become an artist? Should I sell my art? Where should I sell my art? How come I don't have enough time to paint? How do I carve out some time in my schedule? How come my schedule just keeps getting away from me? And these are all, of course, little problems that are around an artist and an art business. But of course, this process can apply to any part of your life. So I just want you to think about it. Is the cause of the problem a circumstance, or is it the way you're thinking about the circumstance? Okay, now that you've kind of thought that through and determined and stepped back a little bit, I want you to now ask yourself the question, what is obvious? And it's so interesting with problems or issues in our lives. Often we are the last to know, right? When you see someone and they get divorced from their partner, and then all their friends say, "Oh my gosh, we knew that should have happened 10 years ago," right? We're the last to know. Or you quit your job and you go back to art school and your friends say, "Oh my gosh, I've been waiting for that to happen. You've been talking about that for 10 years. Why didn't that happen earlier? It was so obvious that you needed to do that." These moments can be frustrating because we're not looking at the obvious in our lives. We're trying to smooth over it. The left side of our brain wants things to really stay the same, wants order, and wants numbers and systems. Okay. The right side of our brain is what V. Ramachandran, who's a neurologist, calls an anomaly detector. Our right side of our brain is actually seeing the world and detecting things that are off. And the left side wants to smooth that over and keep order. Okay, so when we as creative people, we see the obvious, we see, oh my gosh, I should become an artist. I should go to France and paint. I should do this or that because we're excited about it and we're excited about something new. The left side of our brain wants to say, nothing to see here, wants to deny it, wants to keep things the same. So sometimes things are very obvious, but our brains doesn't want us to do that thing that we really want to do because it doesn't fit into the current system, even though it's very simple and obvious. Okay, so what is simple? What is the simple answer to your problem? And this may be, you're out in the rain and you're getting wet. The simple answer may be to put on a coat, put on a hat, use an umbrella. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you are thinking that way or you're going to do it. Okay, so often we don't think of the obvious, we don't think of the simple. And this brings me to a concept that my coach, Brooke Castillo, uses called fix versus solve. When we fix a problem, that is identifying the problem right now and what is wrong. Okay, I'm getting wet because I'm standing out in the rain. To fix that problem, I put an umbrella up. To solve that problem, I might build a house or find some shelter or so on, right? You have, in her case, she gave this example. You have a broken arm. You go to the doctor. The doctor gives you some medicine for the pain and you feel better for a minute. And you keep going back because you have to fix that problem over and over. But to solve the problem, you actually need to be aware that you have a broken arm. You tell the doctor you have a broken arm, and then you solve that problem. Okay, so fix versus solve. Sometimes we just have an immediate problem. We need to fix the problem in the most obvious way possible. So I remember when I was deciding that I wanted to go back to art school and be an artist, my immediate fix was I'm starting to make art. I started drawing. I started reading books about artists because I had a full-time job. I couldn't go back to art school right then. But after a while, I realized that I needed to solve this problem. And I stepped back from my life and looked at it. And the solution was I need to make a plan to save my money and go back to art school and become an artist. So fixing the problem was, yes, I'm going to continue to learn as much as I can about art and all of that, but it wasn't quite enough and it wasn't quite the solution that I really needed. Okay, so how can I solve this problem in the simplest, most obvious way possible? As you go and look at your simplicity to complexity scale, it's helpful to determine where your problem is that you're looking at on this scale. What is the most simple fix? What is the most simple solution? What is the most obvious solution? And what is the most obvious fix? Sometimes you need to fix it first and then solve it. And sometimes you can just go straight to the most obvious, simple solution to solve your problem. Okay, I hope this was helpful to think about how simple life is versus how complex, and how we can fix problems and solve them together with courage and self-love. And I'll see you next week on Thought Salon.